Welcome back to the Solution Zone on Talk Radio 1230 KJFK. And it is my great pleasure for the first time to welcome Senator Barack Obama to the Solution Zone. Senator, thanks for being on the program with us today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being with you.
Well, I wanted to talk to you, very important news this week, and I first wanted to talk about the national intelligence estimate that's come out. And the Bush administration, it turns out, had knowledge of this estimate, and we're talking about with regard to Iran stopping their nuclear program about 4 years ago. The President of the United States had knowledge of this, and yet he continued to ratchet up this, a lot of people might refer to it as warmongering. How dangerous is this?
Oh, I think it's profoundly dangerous, but it is part of the ideological bent of this administration that has to change. It's part of the reason why we have seen our standing in the world plummet. It is the same mentality that got us into Iraq. It is an example of ideology trumping fact and trumping realities on the ground.
When you talk about it, when you talk about it as being the same ideology that got us into Iraq, I think that's what a lot of people are feeling. And they feel more and more that the longer President Bush is in this position of being the leader of our country, the more dangerous things are. Just this national intelligence estimate itself scared a lot of people, thinking, we were ratcheting up war toward this country based on nothing. And people are wondering, Senator Obama, why nobody is holding President Bush accountable for these actions.
Well, my expectation is that the Senate Intelligence Committee needs to hold the president accountable. I mean, we need to find out why it is that the president was informed that there were new intelligence sources in August, and yet continued to engage in the sort of World War III talk that he was engaged, and get clarity on how intelligence is being fed to the president and how he's evaluating it or not evaluating it. Now, I know that there's some who believe that this is yet one more reason why some sort of impeachment proceedings need to move forward.
Yes, and I think it's reasonable.
Well, and I have to say that I am not a proponent of that strategy, partly because I think that there are enough current checks on the president that it would be, despite the desires of Cheney and potentially Bush, that there are enough checks, particularly with the new release of the intelligence estimates.
But that was being suppressed, and it was only through the virtue of people really forcing this national intelligence estimate out that allowed us to find this out in time. But this was suppressed for a long, long period of time, vital information.
Well, as I said before, what I think we have to be looking towards is how do we assure that the next president is not only getting good intelligence information, but how do we make sure that the next president has a different worldview, that we're not just ending the war in Iraq, but we're changing the mindset that got us into the war. And this is the reason why, as you'll recall, from the start of this campaign, I've said that I would initiate direct talks with Iran.
Right.
That it makes no sense for us to engage in this Bush-Cheney theory that you only talk to folks who agree with you and that you like. My belief is that we have to engage in people we don't like, and Iran is at the top of that list. One of the interesting things about the intelligence estimate was that in Section E, it specifically said that the Iranians respond to both carrots and to sticks, and that we need to offer them paths whereby they can meet their national interests at the same time as we are meeting ours. And that has not been explored, and that's one of the top priorities that I'm going to be putting forward as president, along with ending this war in Iraq.
And I think everybody would agree that diplomacy is definitely the way to go. But I wanted to get back to accountability because really, that's something that's not being discussed as much as I think the American people feel it needs to be. And when you are, if you were to be elected president of the United States, Senator Obama, do you feel that we need to look back if the investigations have been done on this administration, find out what happened? Because the fear is that there's a dangerous precedent being set. These CIA interrogation tapes missing, warrantless wiretapping, all of these are violations of the Constitution, and people can be forgiven for thinking that it seems like we only enforce the Constitution when it's politically expedient.
Well, one of the things that I've said, and I've said this repeatedly publicly since I taught constitutional law for 10 years, is that one of my first acts as president is going to be to call in my new Attorney General to review every single executive order that's been issued, to overturn those that are undermining the Constitution, undermining our civil liberties, that are promoting this cockamamie theory of unitary government that says that somehow the executive branch it does not need to obey the Constitution.
But Senator Obama, forgive me.
Signing statements.
You just said.
Let me
okay, go ahead.
And during that process of review, if it's determined that laws have been broken, then obviously accountability would be part of my Attorney General's job.
But why not determine that now while the president is in power so that we can stop further, as you said, grave breaches from occurring? Why not do that now?
Because the impeachment mechanism is a very blunt tool.
Okay.
And it is one fraught with politics. And if I am right that in fact we are on the brink of a potential breakthrough in terms of realigning politics in this country, because it's not just Democrats who are frustrated by it, it's with Republicans as well, then we've got a mechanism to remove this guy from office. And that is that he is now term limited, and we have a democratically controlled Congress. We have a democratically controlled Senate. And what is important for us to do is to make sure that we are giving him as little running room as possible over the next year. But what's also important is making sure that we win this election.
But what about the lives that are lost while he remains in power? What about the people who are dying in Iraq, getting into a war based on lies? What about holding somebody accountable for that? What if you're the parent of a dead soldier and somebody says, let's wait a year? I'm serious. This is the question I get asked all the time.
All I'm suggesting is that the notion that we could somehow initiate impeachment proceedings and get those done more quickly than us booting George Bush, Dick Cheney, and his administration out of office is just not accurate.
Senator, it only took 3 months during the Nixon administration. We hear that argument all the time that it would take too long or that it couldn't be done simultaneously. People aren't buying that. As a constitutional scholar, how can you convince us that that's the right thing to do?
Well, my suspicion is I can't convince you based on this conversation.
Well, it's not just me, though.
All I'm saying is I disagree with the premise that the only way for us to hold this administration accountable is to launch impeachment proceedings. So, we have a fundamental disagreement on this front. It sounds like we have agreement on shared values and where this country needs to go.
Definitely.
What I don't want to do is to get embroiled in what I think will empower and energize Republicans and supporters of Bush who right now are on their heels and we're on the brink of knocking them out.
Why, Senator, would it energize them if crimes were revealed? I think it would weaken the Republican Party.
You are assuming that we are not currently trying our best to document and investigate problems that are out there.
So you think that's weakening them?
You don't simply saying that crimes have been committed is different from proving that crimes
warrantless wiretapping is a proven crime. I mean, Bush himself admitted that he violated that law.
Christine,
Sorry.
Clearly you disagree with me on this one.
The violation of the law is pretty clear.
I've enjoyed our conversation.
I've enjoyed it as well. I'd like to continue it another time. Senator Barack Obama, thanks so much for being with us.